Hello, welcome back to All for United WFC. Jess Simpson has signed a new contract, 2 contracts in a week or so. It's exciting times. We're getting the contracts rolling in now, signed until 2027. A promising youngster that I'm sure a lot of people are excited to see the future of her. So I've got Cerys with me to talk a little bit about through this one. But just Cerys, just your initial thoughts really on this one. We saw this one come out a couple of hours ago. Just your quick thoughts on it before we dive into some of the detail of this.
Yeah, it's sort of the same as what we said with Jade. It's really good to see young players like feeling that confidence to commit. Not obviously as long as Jade. I think it's this Jess Simpson's new deal ends in 2027. Jade's in 2028 with an option to add 1 year. But still, that kind of commitment to the club as young players is something that I take as a real positive, because I think a criticism of United, as I said on our show last week, has been that young players see us as more of a stepping stone rather than a club that they want to commit to and that they're going to win titles with. So that perception seems to be if that ever was the perception, that now seems to be shifting, which is really positive. I think for us to have depth in the fullback positions is something that United fans are just like can't even get their heads around. So that's really positive. I mean, obviously she's gone out back on loan again to Bristol City and made her first appearance there. I think she started against London City in her first game back there. So clearly they're going to be, building minutes in for her. That last loan spell got obviously cut off pretty much straight away in 2023 at the start of last season when she injured her ACL. So this is like her first opportunity to get consistent minutes for a while, which is really positive. But obviously, I mean, you saw her, Connor, when she made her competitive debut for United against Everton in the League Cups. Like, talk a little bit about sort of what you got from that performance.
I think, yeah, because I guess you hear players that are good through the academy and you kind of, that they're talented. Everyone who comes through the academy is going to have talent with them, but you worry a little bit. And it's a question I want to come back to in terms of how we integrate more academy players into the first team, because it's not something we're known for. But Jess came on against Everton. I think it surprised a lot of people. The people that were stood around me were just being like, oh, okay. Like, the talent is a lot better than maybe some people thought. Not scared on the ball, putting some brilliant crosses in. She had a couple of corners that she took as well, because for some reason this season our corner takers are all fullbacks for whatever that reason is. But she took a couple of corners, brilliant crosses in, and just got stuck in. I think it was a real eye-opener to think, okay, we have got a really good player here. I don't think there was any doubt in her talent, but I think when you sign Anna Sandberg for a Swedish record fee, Gabby George, obviously a big name, come back from an ACL injury as well. When you've got those two, Blundell was one of the the better players over the last couple of years as well at left back. There's a lot of competition there, so I think people feared for Jess a little bit. But I think that performance against Everton, now obviously she's on loan, has really put her up the pecking order, and it's exciting for her and for the club to have another player come through the ranks that is clearly very talented. And this is against a good Everton team that she come up against in her first competitive minutes for United.
It's right what you say as well. Like, left back has suddenly become quite a competitive position for us. We've obviously got Gabby George has been the starting left back this season, backed up by Anna Sandberg, with Hannah Blundell obviously being off expecting a child. And now we've got Jess extending her contract as well. What do we think this means in terms of the future going forward? Because I could be wrong, but I can't see Hannah Blundell displacing either Gabby George or Anna Sandberg when she comes back from however long she has off. We obviously know she's out for the season, but for how long after that? And then by that time, Anna's going to have kept developing, Gabby's going to have kept developing, Jess will be back from loan. Like, what does this mean for her?
I think that's the big question now in terms of, and a question I want to come back to in terms of Jess's individual plan. But I think, where does this leave the likes of Hannah? I think Hannah's the one. If Jess is going to come into this, Hannah's the one that is probably going to fall out of favour at left back, which sounds strange, really, considering the season she's had. But I think when you come back after having a child, which obviously she's off at the moment, she'll come back for next season. I don't know how she displaces either of Gabby or Anna, whereas I think Jess, because she's a lot younger, I think what is Jess? She's 20 now, and I don't know how old Hannah is. I think she's 30, 31. So that, it's a good difference in age, in development that Jess has got. And obviously Anna's young as well, and I think Gabby's mid to late 20s, isn't she? So, there's a lot more development there with Jess. And it's a question I wanted to ask you, really, in terms of, because you mentioned the competition in that left-back slot, do we think Jess has to change position to get into the first team? because with some players maybe switch sides, I don't think she can play on the right, if I'm totally honest. She might be able to if she develops early enough, but does she need to maybe become a centre-back or maybe somewhere else? Do you think she has to move position to break into that team? Because I said you can't have 4 left-backs. You're never going to play.
No, I mean, like, you're absolutely right. If we carry on with the amount of left-backs we've got in the squad, she won't get any minutes. Like, is the sad... Obviously, that or someone else won't get any minutes, right? Like, that's the sad reality of it, and the nice problem that comes with having very talented players. I think the best thing for her to do would be to switch to the right. That would be really convenient for us in terms of finally having some backup. To be fair to Aoife Mannion, like, she's obviously still there, but like, other than that, some backup to Jade Riviere, because we know how kind of injury prone she is. Like, having some more backup to Jade in that right back position would be really valuable. The question is kind of, is it too late for her to make that development? I can't remember if she's left-footed or right-footed. Like, obviously that could kind of...
Left.
Yeah, so then that makes it even more difficult, that switch. So then there's the question of, can she move over in centre-back? And is that a solution that would maybe allow us to actually have some rotation in the centre-backs? Because Maya and Millie are 2 players that we've been extremely lucky with, in that for several seasons they've been very consistent and very good at not getting injured. But in the event that one of them does get injured at the moment, other than dropping Dom back into her kind of original centre-back position, we don't have that much cover. So I think maybe, like, trying to develop as a left-sided centre-back could be good for Jess in terms of giving her more of a chance to break into the team, just to offer that rotation option in, like, cup games, in sort of fixtures against sides lower down the table, to allow our 2 starting centre-backs to actually get some rest every now and again, because it's just not something that we ever do.
And I think as well, obviously you've got Lucy Newell coming through the ranks as well, recently signed a pro contract, you know, her being a centre-back as well. And this is a question I just wanted to ask you, really, in terms of what we think the long-term plan is for Jess, because it's 2 years, 2 years from the summer, so the June of 2027 she signed up for. There's got to be a plan in there, otherwise she wouldn't have signed that contract in the first place. What do you think she needs? Obviously, she's on loan at the moment. We'll wait and see how the rest of the season goes for her over at Bristol City. But do you think, in my head, I was thinking a 2-year contract, by the last year of the contract, they're hoping she breaks into the first team, is how I've read this. It's almost like maybe next season it's another loan, and then 26 to 27 is the year she breaks into the team, is how I've read that. Do you kind of see the same, or do you think she needs another loan after this one, or do you think she's ready now to kind of make that jump maybe?
To be honest, I haven't seen enough of her yet to know kind of what stage she's at, because she's had, obviously, her minutes for us have been so limited. Her last loan spell at Bristol, she was horrendously unlucky to pick that up that early, to pick up that injury, and literally, like, I think it was the second appearance of her loan spell, right? So I'm really looking forward to actually getting the chance to watch more of her in the second half of this season at Bristol. But I think I would probably agree that if you're giving a young player, a 20-year-old player as well, so, you know, we're not talking about a teenager, a child, like, you would think that by the end of a 2-year contract, you would be expecting her to make that step up into the first team. I mean, if we look at Maya, right, like, I think everyone forgets how young she is, and she is already a starting centre-back and our captain. I think there's that expectation at United that in your early 20s, you should be ready to make that step. I think the challenge for her is just, I think the main challenge for Jess, to be honest, is displacing either Gabby George, Anna Sandberg, or Millie Turner if she tries to adapt into a left-sided centre-back, which none of those 3 are going to be easy players to shift. But I would agree that, like, I think having that competition for centre-back certainly would be very positive. And then on the left, I think it's really a question at that point of squad management. You know, if, say, we have Hannah Blundell coming back as well, how do you manage that situation with 4 left-backs? You can't. Like, we cannot rotate everyone that frequently that they all get a decent amount of minutes. So I would agree that by signing a contract till summer 2027, by which point she'll be 22, 23, I think the club clearly thinks she's got potential to be breaking into the first team by that point. But, like, who does she displace to do that?
I think that's the big question. I'd love to know what the planet, not just with her, like I said, because I think this has a knock-on effect for Hannah, if I'm totally honest. I wouldn't be surprised if Hannah leaves after the pregnancy, but, you know, I know she's spoken up about wanting to come back. But I just think, you know, everything around Manchester United women in the last year or so has been changing the culture. It's about getting younger players in and recruiting that type of player that's coming through. And I think this is another indication to me that maybe a player like Hannah will have to move on. And Jess is that going to be that player that's the third left back, you know, to kind of rotate in and out depending on injuries. Because we have been hit bad with injuries over the last 18 months or so, and they do happen throughout a season. So there will be opportunities there.
Yeah, no, I think I probably agree on Hannah. Like, she's been an incredible servant to the club, and I'm not criticising her at all. It's just I will also be interested to see. I can't remember. Have United ever brought a player back from pregnancy? We obviously had Siobhan Chamberlain, but she left pretty much straight away.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I don't think we've ever brought anyone back from pregnancy, and it's not, you know, Chelsea have sort of led the way in getting a lot better at doing that, to the point where, like, to be perfectly clear, like, having a kid is not the end of a female footballer's career anymore. It doesn't have to be, but United have never actually managed that situation. And I think it is probably, with the combination of that factor and the fact that Mark Skinner's spoken a lot about moving towards this like young and hungry model, I would say that the bringing Jess in, probably it looks more to me like Hannah might be moving towards the end of her time at the club, which is a shame. She's been a fantastic servant to the club, but I guess it's that natural evolution that as the team progresses, we're all going to have to get used to, seeing more of those players who've been there since not quite the start in Hannah's case, but close to it, like seeing them leave.
No, absolutely. And I want to come to one final point, and before we kind of wrap this shorter show up. And Jess said, I'll just read out Jess's quote that she gave with United on signing it. She said, you know, it's been such a good journey here, starting from 11 years old with the academy. It's been my dream since playing as a little kid to play for Manchester United, and I'm living that dream right now. I'm delighted to sign a new deal with the club. And I read that in context with the last question I've got in terms of how we start getting some of these academy players into the first team, because we've not really done it. We've had players on the fringes and then they move on. Saf has obviously played a game now, and you know, we've had players in the past. Maria Edwards was very good and moved on. Kira Barry's kind of been on close and injured and not really broken. Alessira Hearn's on loan now. We've not really had anyone that's come in and broken. And I've always said Jess is now the next one who's closest. This long-term, this 2-year deal would indicate to me that the club feel that as well, because we see other teams are doing it pretty well in bringing their youngsters into the team and then they stay in the first team. I think that for United now, and I know Matt Johnson spoke a lot about this. He spoke about it in a matchday program at the back end of last year about the men's record, you know, having a player in the matchday squad from the academy for 80 odd years or whatever the record is. Whereas on the women's, he said, oh, we want an academy player in the 11, not just in the squad. And I think that's the next step for us now. How do you think we can do it? Because there's not that many. The argument always is there's not enough games to play these kind of players and to bed them in. But at some point, for me, you've got to make that jump. You know, in a WSL game against a team at home that you're maybe expecting to beat, just give them half an hour at the end of a game, or, you know, give them a start maybe if you're feeling that confident. But where can you see this kind of go in, and how do we think we can bring these players in a bit more?
I think it's a really important question, because that sort of academy link is such an important, like we see discussion about it on the men's side a lot, that like it's a key part of United for me. If you ask me like what are the defining traits of this club, I would call that one of them. If I wasn't being, you know, like jokey and sarcastic and negative, I would say that one of our best traits is that strong link with youth and with the academy. So I think it is an important point. And like you say, the excuse and the reason has always been there's not enough games in a season. That, I think it is a factor. And this is where we look at sort of expanding the WSL or this sort of thing. But like, I do think there needs to be that bravery of, if you're saying a player is on the brink of that being ready to break into the squad, then you need to like push them over that line at some point, like whether that's using the loan market to build up their minutes and then bringing them in for the last 15, 20 minutes of a WSL game where you've got the lead. Like, I think there's always more of the challenge that Jess, Lucy Newell have. There is always much more hesitancy, I think, to sub in a defender when you're defending a lead, especially when it's a narrow lead for obvious reasons. It's not the same as, you know, our 18-year-old winger coming on when we're 2-0 up. Everyone's like, oh, okay, this is interesting. Like, we'll see what she can do. Our 18-year-old left back coming on when we're 2-0 up, it's a bit like, okay, we don't really know like what's going to happen here. So, but I think we've got to start being brave like that at some point. And we've got to, I think, what I've said before about like us developing United's reputation as a place where young players develop for a long-term career rather than developing players at the academy. I mean, we saw it before the women's team reformed, right? You got your Katie Zellum, your Alatoon, the amount of players who were United through and through who ended up going off from our academy to play for rival clubs because we didn't have that route in. Obviously, there's not that extreme version of it anymore, but we've got to make sure that that sort of mentality of we would love to play for United, but we don't think we can get a foot in the door. We've got to make sure that doesn't continue. I think that one last like final point on it. I think one reason we've been quite almost hesitant or not had that same record of bringing youngsters in, we were already so far behind, right, in reforming the women's team. And we almost needed to, rather than relying on bringing in like homegrown talent, we needed to make some like big signings. Like, you know, we needed the sort of, I don't know, like the Mary Earps, the whoever, like you need the Grace Clinton, for instance. You need these players who are proven and have a track record and can come in and like they can do it. But now that we've established that foundation, we need to start thinking towards the future rather than being in this cycle where every few years it's okay, there's this really quality player that we've brought in, but they don't have that same tie to the club. Like, I don't know, it is difficult because with the amount of games in the season, it's not as easy to rotate. And I do have sympathy for that, but I think we have to start being braver with it.
No, absolutely. Because we've seen youngsters move on. Maisie Davis is a prime example of this. She left last summer and was actually on the City bench, you know, the other night as well. So it can be done. You can. Granted, City have got a lot of injuries at the moment, but that's a player that was, you know, very talented defender that came through at United, but left because there was no pathway for her to come through to the first team. So this deal makes me optimistic that, you know, because I was getting a bit worried with Jess that she'd probably end up leaving this summer anyway. The fact she signed for 2 more years makes me think that there's a plan for her to get her into the first team. And maybe we'll see this with a couple of others. Who knows? But no, she's an incredibly talented fullback. And hopefully we get to see her a bit more in a United shirt over the coming kind of years. Now she's signed up for a couple more on that one. We'll round it off there. And thank you everyone for watching. We're delighted, Jess, if you do watch this one back, that you have decided to commit for a couple more years at Manchester United. Make sure you're liking this video and subscribing if you haven't already. See you guys later.